have to really start with how fundamentally powerful culture is, all forms of culture, including visual art, music, language.
We can rebuild buildings, we can rebuild bridges, we can rebuild schools, but if we do not incorporate our story, our art, and our culture, and our history.
A cultural framework. The theme for our community is community, culture, and commerce. And that's not just what Ashe says, that's what everybody says.
Part of the creative placemaking work is not about arts and culture on its own, but arts and culture as it is integrated in how we think of healthy communities.
What's important to you, what's important to me, how might we use arts and culture to advance our joint missions?
Here. She was the other co-author of the National Endowment for the Arts Creative Placemaking White Paper with Anne Gadwa and Nicodemus. And she is going to be moderating this panel as well as the wrap-up with each of the city partners at 3. So just wanted to, Anne, you want to wave to the nice people? So you know where she is. And then next to her, we have Peggy Feehan, who's the executive directrice of Codafil. New position. You'll notice there's a trend in Lafayette. We have a lot of new people in leadership roles, which is a good thing. And then next to her is Cheryl Castile. She's the Louisiana Cultural Development Division of the Arts Executive Director, right? Yes. Okay, good. I always mess that up. And then we haven't met yet, but I'm assuming you're Richard Hartley, who is the new, again, Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, Tourism Deputy Secretary. And then next to him is Kristen Sanders, also new, Assistant Secretary of the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development. And then we also have Ms. Claudette Thariot. She's the president of the Congrès Mondial Acadien 2019 Organizing Committee. So that is going to be in Moncton and Prince Edward Island in Quebec next year. Not really? Oh, I'm confused. Sorry. Okay, she'll tell you all about it. Don't listen to me. I'm going to turn it over to Anne and kind of keep time. But the purpose of this is to kind of zoom out from Lafayette and see what kind of impact we can have on a state level, what kind of resources we have available to make that happen, and then zooming out again to an international perspective too with Ms. Claudette. So, Anne, you want to?
Yes. Thanks so much. Well, it's really great to see everybody here, and there's more room up here if you'd like to come up, be a little closer to the panel, and more intimate. It's really nice to be closer. I'm so thrilled to be here. I've been in every one of the towns all week long. I gave an opening keynote, which was about language and its significance to us, and in a kind of more generic and historical and prehistorical way, and also about the streams of migration into the United States, the original Native American languages and all the different language streams that came in. I found some wonderful maps of them and set that out. And now I've learned so much more. It's been a really wonderful experience. So my job is to really ask questions of each of these people who are working at the state level about how, from their perch at a statewide level, they see all of this wonderful bubbling up about creative placemaking, with a very also prominent role for the French language in that as a very distinctive feature of Louisiana. Some questions. So I'm going to pose each question, and each of you can say something about them. And they were given to me, these questions. So there's 5 questions. So you can do anything you want. Okay, this is a pretty apparently simple one, but I think it's actually more complex than that. So it is. In your view, what are the benefits of French in Louisiana? gonna go right down. Okay, well, then it's my job, so that's kind of important to me, because I'm the head of the French agency for the state of Louisiana. So thank you to my fellow new bosses for giving Louisiana the opportunity to have a French agency, which I have 2 employees here. And so for us, it is vital to conduct our business in French, for French. Because of French. So without French, we would not exist. So I would say that.
For the division of the arts, and when I think of the arts in general, the French culture, the French language is important on a number of different levels. When I think, the thing that came to mind initially was kind of a circle that happens with the music in this area, specifically in the Acadiana area. And with the music where the lyrics are Cajun and Creole, French language. And what happens with that is that it attracts people to the music of this area, which attracts people to this area. But when they pay attention to that music, because they may be hearing a language they're familiar with, or a language that they have no familiarity with, so it piques their curiosity. So they become engaged in trying to find out what is that music all about. I cannot tell you how many people began learning the French language because of a Cajun song they heard, or a Creole song they heard. And so it goes both ways. People who speak French hear their language in a song, but maybe know nothing about the cultures that come out of this area. So now they pay attention to this area. So I think it's very important with that. It's very important to our musician artists. The other thing I think of with our creative writers, French plays a very strong role here with some very specific people that allows them the opportunity to connect with who they are, how they grew up, and being able to write in poetry and poisson, who's here and speaks French. How do you say poetry? Poésie. Oh yeah, right next to me. But you know, I've seen that with French be so important to those artists and to their communities to be able to express who they are and where they come from in that French language, in poetry and in creative writing. And the other thing, when I really look at creative placemaking, French really, if we can speak about that and to the level that we can, and involve that in our creative placemaking projects and initiatives, that creates buy-in for a number of people. When they all of a sudden hear somebody talking about that, and that they're expressing that that is an important piece, your French language, the traditions, the French traditions you grew up with, that's an important piece in what we're trying to do here, and that's really the beginning level of what we're all looking to. That helps create buy-in in that area that we're trying to work in. So that's just a little bit of the many different levels where I see French important with the arts in our state.
I'm going to just kind of piggyback what these two wonderful ladies have said, and you can tell from my accent right off, I'm from North Louisiana. I can't deny this West Monroe redneck accent. But I love the history of our state, I love the culture of our state, and I love being able to promote the state. And by background, I was an educator. I was a high school mathematics teacher, then I was principal of a large high school, Washita Parish High School, then I became superintendent of schools. And I'm thinking about this overarching question that was asked first here. What are the benefits of French in Louisiana? And so I'm going to give you what I think just from my worldview, from my experiences as an educator and watching. First of all, I think it's very, very important that we preserve our culture, that we learn to appreciate our culture. In today's world, in education, unfortunately, a lot of the French teaching classes are gone by the wayside. And I've known superintendents that have had to decide, do I keep this class or do I put it into the mathematics or English classes? And you make that decision as a superintendent, as a leader. And I watched it as I began my career of teaching at Washita Parish. I knew when I first started back in the early 80s, all elementary schools had a French teacher. It was wonderful. And the French teachers were always the most popular persons in the building because they would travel from classroom to classroom and teach the kids. I remember going and hearing little kids singing in French and doing this. They didn't get real in depth with it, but it was important. There's several reasons that I think it's very important that we try to preserve that. First of all, our culture. And people are very intrigued by the culture of Louisiana. And tourism is a big driver of our economy in the state. If we lose our authenticity, we will not have the number of visitors to our state. There's a big interest in international visitors now. And I worry about that because we aren't doing as good a job of teaching as we should be with Louisiana history, with the culture, with the arts. You play a very important role trying to push the arts. But I've thought from an economic impact, if we lose the authenticity of our state, and French going by the wayside, that's why it's so wonderful to see the festivities and the activities and festivals here in Lafayette. It needs to spread. I was fortunate enough at Washita Parish High School, we taught French 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now at that school, there are no French classes being taught because of the shortage of French teachers. I was fortunate, I had a lady, Dr. Joan Chartkoff. She had a doctorate in the French language. She was phenomenal. And after she left, they could not find more French teachers. And so I think there's all kinds of opportunities if we really hone in. I know I've had calls before from attorneys and saying, do you know anyone that speaks French? I need something interpreted. I've had book publishers call, or also I've had some educational publishing companies. We need somebody real quickly that can interpret translate this, yes, into French for us real quickly. It's a need for that. And I think the more we push and make people realize the importance of it to our arts and culture, then we can start doing a better job of getting young people interested in taking French classes, getting young people interested in majoring in French and in teaching it, because there's nothing like a French immersion school. We went to it my first week on the job. Kristen invited me to it. It's the most incredible program, and I visited the French immersion schools in Lafayette and Jefferson Parish. But that's just kind of a global view of what I think the benefits are, but I think it's so important to our state cultural, which attracts visitors, which leaves dollars in our community.
So I get the privilege of overseeing the Office of Cultural Development, which is Codeville, the arts, historic preservation, and archaeology. And for me, I don't see Codeville and the French language as a separate piece of it. I'm an architectural historian and an attorney by training. French language, French history was a part of all of my educational background. The architecture we have, the terms we use for a lot of our buildings and building techniques come from our French heritage. In the law, particularly here in Louisiana, so many of our legal terms are influenced by our French heritage. So with the Office of Cultural Development, I feel like French language is such an integral part of our entire history that needs to be preserved and maintained. We need to utilize that, remember it, and promote it. And then I'm also the parent of French immersion students. So Richard came to my kids' school for their international festival performance. That gives us such a huge advantage to have these children, this population that remembers their French language, their French heritage, but can also be competitive in our modern world and can utilize that professionally. And my kids, I hope for them that they will have such an advantage having such a broader worldview. Codeville brings in these amazing teachers who teach them about places across the globe that they wouldn't have heard of otherwise, and it's all due to the benefit of the French immersion program.
Bonjour. I'd like to start by saying what's the Congrès Mondial Acadien to make sure everybody understands.
Please, yes.
Alors, the Congrès is a gathering of Acadians and Cajuns throughout the world. They get together every 5 years since 1994, and it was here in Louisiana in 1999. And next year, in 2019, it will be Kate, listen. It will be in southeastern New Brunswick, including Moncton, and Prince Edward Island. So there's a total of 20 communities that will be hosting the next Congrès Mondial Acadien. We're here to promote it and also to showcase some of our Acadian artists that will be part of the International Festival. I found your questions quite interesting from the conference this morning. Where are we from? Well, to me, it's all part of the answer of this question as to where are we from. Because as you know, we share the same history, we share the same ancestors as Acadian. I'm an Acadian, and we may have been luckier in Canada, in Eastern Canada, to have been able to maintain our language. But I'm from Prince Edward Island, and we have the same struggle. We did lose all our schools, and we're getting them back. And we may be just ahead of you, but it's the same development, it's the same steps that we're following. And maybe we can see more of the benefits of having French as part, but there are many, many benefits, but one of the benefits is to give the people that had the language, it's part of the culture, and to give them opportunities to learn the language again, because it's part of their life, it's part where they're from. So that's also part of it, and to see how the pride they have in learning the language. And I'm sure you noticed the pride of the grandparents, seeing their grandkids being in immersion program and learning the language, because they know it's part of the way of life, it's the part of the culture. So I think that's an important component. Yes, it does bring a lot of economic benefits to the state, to our provinces, if we have both languages. And for the kids, there are more opportunities to find jobs in Canada. We are a bilingual country. Another point I just want to make, that don't be afraid to ask us to share our experiences and to share some of the questions that were asked today of how we do a conference in a bilingual way. Well, we do it all the time. So maybe we have tricks, and Peggy would know, she's from home, New Brunswick, and on how we have been able to approach some of the challenges you may be facing in doing things in both languages. We're there, we have done it, and I'm sure we would be quite willing to share some of our experiences and knowledge in this area.
One thing I want to add about the French immersion classes, I think we're probably preaching to the choir, but you do know that students who are in full language immersion classes may score much higher on their standardized tests than students who come used to the regular program. So that's another benefit. Teachers are ready to think how
We can clap. I want to add just a couple of things, because this conversation just really brought it home. So I'm from the other end of the Mississippi River, up near the source in northern Minnesota. And when Ann and I were doing this project for the NEA, we had funding in a short period of time. We could not travel to go anywhere, so we did everything by phone. And we found literally hundreds of cases that we could explore. And one of the ones we ended up with was Arnoldville. And one of the reasons was because of the French language tables and the emphasis on them. And this led us to one of our inferences in our piece, which is that distinctiveness is a really important part of, creating a sense of community, a bonding thing, but also a way of presenting yourself to the world. And my husband's already gone on his motorcycle, but while he was here earlier in the week, he explained to everybody that when we first came to Arnoldville a couple of years later, and he saw these French language tables, he's a, fully Finnish American. All of his parents spoke Finnish at home until their older kids went to school and were, severely reprimanded. So he never learned Finnish. And he went home and he went to our old folks home down the road and he started a Finnish language table. And now he's been to Finland several times and is able to converse, which I told him I wouldn't go with him because then he would speak too much English. And he's really revived that. And also right down the road from us, 20 miles is a Native American reservation, and they are doing the same thing. They are restoring their Ojibwa language. They have language tables. They have summer language camp that involves all ages and all people. And again, the point that you made so beautifully about elders, this bond between the elders and the young people comes very much alive in these language tables. So thank you all for that. Okay, difficulties. What are the difficulties of working with French in Louisiana? And what are the opportunities? So can we focus on the difficulties?
Well, for us at Codeville, our main difficulty is finding enough French teachers for all the demand that we have. We have become a little bit victims of our success. French emerging schools, French as a second language, there's a deep shortage in the high schools, and unfortunately we Codeville can't even answer that question because our mandate is limited to K-8, because we had to put, we got to stop somewhere, and because we can't do all of K-12. There's a deep shortage of teachers worldwide. British Columbia is stealing New Brunswick's teachers, and France is stealing Belgium's teachers, and then we show up in France and it's like, hey, you want to come teach in Louisiana? And then school districts look at us with big eyes. And so that's our main difficulty this year. We will probably in the fall have some holes, meaning we will leave some spots without a teacher, probably for the first time, or almost the first time in Louisiana. So that's our main difficulty. Anybody that's a French speaker certified in education, they have a guaranteed job. So we wish the word was out a little more for that, but main difficulty. That's
I think a difficulty in the arts is the lack of speakers. And I want to say the lack of speakers who are comfortable speaking French. I want to share just a real world experience I had this morning that I think really takes a look at the difficulty in that when I think of language and the French language, I think of it in terms of language enables. It enables us to really get to know somebody else and to really understand who they are and what their life is and what their community is all about and what their talents are. And so this morning, George Marks had introduced me to Martine Bruno and Jean Roni from Haiti. And I'm trying hard to listen and to speak in French, but I get stuck like a lot of people because of that fear of looking ridiculous, of not being able to keep up, having to ask many times to repeat and to redo. And when George made a comment to me, he said, Cheryl, what Martine does is very similar to Louisiana Folk Roots here in Louisiana, which is an organization I know very well. And I was not able to, at that moment, because of what was happening in my head, I was not able to converse more with Martine to really find out about what the similarities are and a conversation that could have led to some further, not that I still can't do that, but that at that moment, conversations that could have led to some potential partnerships, and just to get some ideas from her that might really benefit what we're doing here. And I walked away, and I knew it was happening when it happened, and when I walked away, I really started thinking about this panel and about that is one of the major difficulties is people getting to a point or allowing themselves to feel comfortable just trying to communicate and to learn who somebody else is and what they're about. And I see that in so many projects that when language comes up, whether it be the title of something, it might be a French title of an art event, and I know there's a number of people that immediately will cross that off their list of things to do because I'm not going to be able to understand it. It doesn't, I'm not going to be able to understand it. It's all going to be in French, or all going to be in Spanish, and so I know that is a real difficult piece. The other part of that is that when you are trying to maybe create some new initiatives and the language that you're not familiar with comes in, there's a number of people like me that walk away trying to figure out how can I get by this? How can I not feel uncomfortable? Why didn't I do that? Questioning yourself. So I think in so many communities that we're working with in terms of allowing, French to weave in and out of what we're doing, it's many of us as practitioner and participants out there needing to relax and needing to know that it's okay to make mistakes and to just talk to whoever it is and ask for help. When you just said about, you should come to us for help, I think we could show you how to do that. That so fed into what was going on in my brain today about doing things bilingually as we're trying to really support our French-speaking, our native-speaking, our Spanish-speaking folks, Laotian, which they're speaking French, most of them, in our state here. But I thought, gosh, that's what we need to do, is to ask for help on really how you do those things in a really effective way bilingually. So I appreciated you saying that.
To respond on what you were saying, I go to Haiti once a year to teach the kids how to play saxophone. So my first year when I got there, I didn't know nothing. So basically I had to go back to the music notes, which is written in French. And they understood when I would say D. So I don't know, I didn't walk away, I couldn't, I was stuck there for a minute. So when it worked out, we talked, he said, how you got a chance to talk to them like that? I said, music, communication, just have a little patience. And it worked out, so I go every year in February, teach the kids how to play, that's music.
Sure. I'm curious, how did that opportunity first come about for you to go there and do
I
that?
was fundraising, I play saxophone, you say. So I was fundraising for some doctors in New Orleans. So he kept asking me to come out there and do that, come help him, come help him. I said, so I talked to my wife, she said, well, you might as well go. But I didn't want to fly. I had enough hours in the service. But I wound up going, and it turned out great. I go every year. They look forward to me coming. But it's, you got to stick your foot in and get in there.
And you're enriched by that experience.
Oh, man.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love
It's
it.
amazing. She's talking about having difficulty speaking French. I can understand that. I don't speak French, but sometimes I have difficulty speaking English. So, no, and I was just thinking about this, and I've watched the change take place in education, and that's my frame of reference on this from a lot. But also, I remember when Spanish became a common offering in schools, word soon got out that it was much more easy for students to learn Spanish than it was to learn French, and you saw that natural decrease start happening in the French classes. And so I think what we need to do as far as that is we have to educate our caregivers, our parents, on the importance of students studying the language, and it can be other than Spanish, because that's basically what's taught in all of our schools, unfortunately. But in Louisiana, we can drive home the narrative about our heritage, about our authenticity. And if you get parents challenging their young people that you need to take French language or another foreign language, not just Spanish, but and you can sell that to parents by saying, if students learn French, they're going to score higher on their standardized tests. It really does happen. They learn high order thinking doing that. So a big issue, though, is the shortage of teachers, as we were talking about. I know there's distance learning programs that students can take. That's not optimal, but there is a place where you can put a teacher and they can address many students at one time. Usually whenever you go to a foreign language class, if it's up the chain like a French 2, French 3 with a distance learning situation, those kids achieve. It's not a good situation, especially in the beginning course, but that may be an alternative to something that can be worked out with Codefield, even though that's in the K-8, that still is a possible option. And then there's different foreign languages, French being one of them, that you can buy the programs and have it locally in school. But you have to have a really good monitor for the person in that room. They may not speak it, may not be a certified teacher, but they know how to keep the kids involved with the computer learning. So there are some challenges. There's maybe some hybrid answers to that, what we can do about that. But I think a big challenge is for parents to start challenging their students. Then if parents will see that, they can get empowered. They can go to their local school boards. They can go to their superintendent and say, hey, why aren't we offering this? What can we do to help you attract some teachers? Could we raise some money? Give a stipend some way, like when you do football coaches, can we give a stipend to our French teacher? So there's some different outside the box thinking that can happen, and I think it's up to us to do that.
So some of the conversations I've had over the past couple of years about difficulties with French in the state revolve around our resources, knowing what they are, knowing where they are, and then having them available in French. And Codaville is working on, you know, a number of initiatives, and we saw just the last hour what Lafayette is doing to really identify those opportunities for French speakers in the community. So Codaville has a Federal Responsable program to recognize French-friendly businesses. We're working on cataloging those places where French speakers can go and have a French-speaking experience. And then the state, also cultural development, cultural recreation, and tourism are the entity tasked with being the keepers of our French language, and we don't have a lot of our resources available in French. We have amazing information from our Folk Life program, amazing, wonderful lesson plans, and a number of different subjects for state museums, for art, for historic preservation, and these things are not in French. So a great opportunity, I think, that we have, and we just brought on a new archaeology outreach person who speaks French and Spanish, and she's super energetic and excited about it. A great opportunity we have is to work with Department of Education, to work with our local schools, these teachers that we're bringing in, who we could pay to do some translation and get more of our resources available in French. And so then it becomes even more a part of our day-to-day lives. And I think the more it's out there as a natural part of our world, the more people will see it and participate in it and recognize the importance.
Yeah, I feel that some of the challenges are educating our partners as to what is the value added of having French in your state, and why is it so much of an asset. So it's all about educating, I think. Even for the Congress, like in Prince Edward Island, we're working with, like we lost all of our school and we're getting them back, and we just opened a new school last week in a community that's called Suri. And so the school is there as a French component. However, the city itself, the town, it's completely English. So we had to educate the municipal council of the benefit of having the Congrès, the community, as one of the host community. So it's all a question of, it took 2 years, but I saw on Facebook they say proud to be part of the Congrès Mondial Acadien 2019. I'm so happy for that, because 2 years ago I was presenting to them and they weren't sure. But it's all a question of educating your partners and proving to them that there is value added of having French as part of your state or our initiative. Another important aspect, I think, too, is involving the young people in community programming, because they don't have many opportunities to speak the language, even though they learn it at school. They go home, maybe their parents don't know the language, so to build, I saw there was a sketch involved around that, but to have opportunities for the young people to be able to speak the language. You have Parle Français, most of it is for adults, but that's something similar for the young people to, they're the leaders of tomorrow, so hopefully that they'll be able to continue and speak the language, that they have opportunities to be able to be involved in the community and speak the language.
They say souris in English. So that, how they say souris in English?
It's souris, but it's the mouse.
It's a mouse. So that's in French. I was wondering if they say souris. It's separate smiles.
I'm just going to ask a question here that comes up from this discussion, which is, what about a community like Arnoldville that has French language tables that have been really initiated by the elders in the community? Is there a way that these French language tables could work with young people? Could maybe somebody from Arnoldville would say something about that?
They have this
Yeah, they do?
Yes.
Oh, so maybe could you just share a little bit about that, since it's...
So we have La Table Jeunesse, which is it's a youth French table that has been started, and they do activities mostly in French, but we like to see it we'd like to see more of it in French rather than just some of it. So the hope is that we started at New News last year, and now we're going to start moving them around throughout along Corridor des Arts through multiple communities, and actually doing them in places of business. So that way, you know, at Russell's Food Center, the activity that takes place within that place deals or focuses primarily on what's happening within the grocery store. So next time it might be in a library, and then go from on and on and on and on.
Cool. Can they go to the nursing home?
Also the nursing home as well.
Yeah, yes.
If I can just add, we've attended a couple of them, not as many as I would like, but they're fantastic opportunities for the kids to, experience activities in French and meet other French-speaking children outside of their own school or community. It also gives the parents an opportunity because we're involved helping them. Those of us who, I took high school French and a little bit of college French. I can understand it some, and I don't ever feel comfortable speaking it, but it gives us an opportunity to learn more too, which is great because there are so many of us parents who have our children now in French immersion, and we're wanting to learn more to keep up, and so they're great programs, and it would be a wonderful thing to have around the state.
An example that happened this week, now I don't know what school it was, Myrtle School? Myrtle Place, where we had a group of 50 young people from New Brunswick that went to school, and they are a young choir, and they met with the choir of that school, and they did songs together, or they spent a morning together. So I think that's great, and there's certainly many other similar opportunities in the future.
And I want to add to that too, Louisiana Folk Roots that I had mentioned earlier. They do a kids camp for music, for learning guitar, accordion, fiddle, and learning the French songs of this area. And so that really pulls in that whole family because the parents are very involved in that camp, but the language is used. And so for some of the young people who don't have the opportunity to be in a French immersion school, there's certain activities like that that will allow them to begin to learn the language in a specific way. I want to say something about Myrtle Place too. They started something, I'm not sure if it's still going on, but after school they had a Cajun musician, Steve Riley from the area here that a lot of people know, began teaching classes at Myrtle Place. Yeah, was that a grant he received? But what's nice about that is then there was a tying in an after-school program with the music of the French-speaking people from this area. And so not only speaking the language, but singing it and playing an instrument to it. So it's a nice weaving.
And he did it also at schools that were not French immersion schools, so that gave some opportunity for the kids monolingual English.
Great. Okay, well, we have 15 minutes left, so I'm going to pose both of the last two questions, and you can sort of pick and choose or mix or match. It's fascinating. I love the interplay. One of them is, in your view, what does the future look like for French in Louisiana? And the other is, how can French be developed as an economic resource in your organization? And it says in your organization.
Can I take the whole 10 minutes? Okay, 50 years ago when they created Codeville, everybody was like, yeah, it's about dead and buried and, who cares about, they're all dead, they're all dying. Well, I don't know, but I think we're pretty much alive, and I know we're so busy. It's like, if French was dead, I think I would be twirling my thumbs. Okay, my thumbs, I'm sorry. But I think French looks great. That the output, the press we're getting, I mean, it's international. Everybody's talking about us. Okay, I just came back from Paris because I'm lucky enough to go work there 3 weeks out of the year. And while I was there, the people that I met, I ended up on French national TV. Everybody knows about us, and everybody's so happy for what's in the works for Louisiana and on an international level. And some of it you don't know, but we will probably be part of the French UN basically, the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, which is 85 French-speaking countries in the world, and we will be at their table in November in Armenia. So it's big what's going on in Louisiana for French, and we're very excited about it.
Yeah, I think what I see is important what is happening at the state, and although Codafil as an organization has been around now for 50 years, and I'm not sure exactly how long it's been under the state umbrella, but we as a staff, and I think sometimes you have some people who've worked there for a long time, and now you have a nice balance of new people, there is really a strong focus on weaving the French language in and out of everything that we all do. And what's happening is that it's really getting all of us in the routine of paying attention. And when we hear the term French, or we hear somebody speak French, or Kristen many times will say, gosh, is there a French component that you could pull into that? When you're meeting with that community, is there, and it might not always be a French component, it might be another language component. I'm really excited. I have worked in the arts here for 26 years, from everything from a gallery to running performing arts centers, to cultural preservation organizations. And I have seen different elements of how the arts are involved with the French language. You kind of go through an ebb and flow. And it's very exciting for me to see what's happening in the area now, and especially at the state level, that we are encouraged and we are challenged to see how we can make French a much more consistent level and weaving through everything we are doing. So I just really wanted to share that with everybody, because I have been very connected to this office for a long time, and it's exciting to see what's happening with that now, and that people are paying attention, and people are putting much effort into what we are doing with our programs.
You know, when I look out in this room right now, it says on the paper, what does the future look like for French in Louisiana? When I see the passion and hear the passion that's in this room, and you've dedicated yourself to today, the festival in Louisiana, I think it's very bright. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't take lots of work. It's going to take work. It takes everybody collaboratively working together. I absolutely love the department that Kristen heads up in our division, and I was telling her assistant yesterday, I said, you might have to run me out of here, because this is my favorite department. There's archaeology and the culture and all that, but I do know the importance of that, and I know that students that get involved with arts, they do much better, they perform better, they have better behavioral records, and it's so much. It expands the neurons in their brain and all of that, so it's very, very important. We cannot let it die. French is a wonderful language to our heritage, and as far as talking about the economic, how can French be developed as an economic resource? We need French speakers when we go to international trade shows, as she can tell you, and with tourism, and I think we have some that y'all carry. So there's that opportunity that it needs to be, and there will be more and more economic opportunities as it's developed, as Cheryl was saying, throughout the state, and we start working together. So keep the passion. That's very, very important. You feed your soul with the French language.
So, the future of French in Louisiana, I would love to see as many French immersion teachers homegrown as from abroad, because I think the teachers from abroad are essential, but having our own students trained and certified and qualified to teach French immersion would be huge. Having economic opportunities for people to utilize French as part of their day-to-day job, not just an added thing socially or, once in a while. And the state, people in the state, recognize the importance of French as much as the international community, and the importance of French in Louisiana, which the international community does. Now, how to get there, we're starting conversations already with more closely with the Department of Education, but talking with economic development on the state level, making connections between local communities who are already working on these things and doing these things, and trying to get the right people together at the table. We won't always have the resources to do it ourselves, and it shouldn't always be from the top down, but bringing those people around the state together to have those conversations and to move it forward. So I think we're at a good place. It won't be fast, but we'll get there. We'll get to that future.
Well, first of all, let me congratulate you for the progress you have made, and it almost gives me goosebumps to hear you, the commitment you have and the passion that you have. You're on the right track. I'm from a province of 145,000 people, Prince Edward Island. We went through the same cycle as you, as we lost our French schools. Today, only 5,000 people still speak the language, but I can tell you, there's 30,000, 40,000 very proud Acadians home. So we've been through the same thing, but we do have our schools today. So Cajun and Acadian, we have the same roots. We're from the same origin. We're the same family. So if we can make a contribution in helping our cousins get back their language, get back their pride, get back their culture. And Peggy, she's from New Brunswick. She's one of ours. And we certainly are very committed. And just finally, I think the Congrès Mondial Acadien can be an element of helping to increase this pride. There's a lot of people here in Louisiana that want to come. We certainly are quite willing to welcome them. When they experience a Congrès, they come back with a sense of pride and a sense that they really want to get engaged in their community in making it happen. The Congrès is 15 days of family reunions where the Thibodeau, the Bro, the Broussard, the Thériault, the Arsenault, they have reunions among themselves. And many of them don't know each other when they get there, but they certainly realize that they're all from the same family. We also like to showcase our Acadian and Cajun artists from all over the world, so there's a lot of shows. We have lots of activities for the youth that are being organized by themselves with the help of our team. And we have conferences, economic development. We are working with the mayor here from Lafayette. He's one of our partners. And certainly we invite you all to come and be part of it from August 10th to the 24th, 2019. And Omni Center, we have happy hour tonight from 4 to 6, and tomorrow we have a reception that you're all welcome. It's on Sunday at 3:30 is our big show. Okay, I'm really doing an ad here. On Sunday at 3:30 is the Scène Internationale will be a special kitchen party that will feature. Kitchen party is where I lived with my grandparents, and that's where you move the kitchen table in our big Acadian houses and take out the fiddle and everybody dances, and that's what we're going to do here on Sunday at 3:30 on the Scène Internationale. We're probably about 150 here during the festival from Acadie that are here. We have a young choir who are about 50, and then with all our artists, with our delegation from the Congress and some of our partner cities, we're a very big delegation, so you'll see many of us around in the next few days. And thank you very much for giving the opportunities to be here today.
Well, this has been a really great panel, and it's really interesting because in my opening keynote on Sunday, I talked about language suppression. I talked about the history in the United States, beginning in the 19th century when public schools came along, in which an ideology was propagated
because we had many, many immigrants and still streams of them coming in from different places, that, you know, it was damaging to a child to have to learn more than one language, and we should, you know, if you want to be American, you shouldn't have, you know, these other languages anymore. And that continued right up to, you know, when my husband and his older brothers and sisters went to school. The older ones only spoke Finn. This is like in the 60s, 50s and 60s. They were just severely treated. And the same thing to Native Americans, of course. So I think it's just so, I feel like the tables have turned. You know, that we're understanding that knowing and speaking more than one language is actually good for the brain, you know, good for sociability, good for commerce. We had some of the earlier speakers spoke to the economic issue and demonstrated how, you know, international commerce is a really big deal, and international tourism is a big deal, and so knowing more than one language is really, really positive. So I think in a way we answer these. I want to thank every member of the panel, Cheryl, Kristen, Richard, Peggy, and Claudette. Please feel free to say hello to them in the quick interim we're going to have before the next panel. And I hope you'll stay around, because the next panel is all about really what are the future possibilities for, you know, this creative placemaking summit work to go on. Thank you all so much. I want to start by, you know, because I'm from Minnesota, I'm going to start by saying something very profound that happened to me this week, which was meeting Phoebe Hayes. And what Phoebe described in our day in New Iberia in a beautiful way, you know, to the other members of her community there, was that there was a whole missing African American history in the books that were written and the monuments and everything else. And she asked them to work with her to change and update that history. I live in a county that right in the middle of the county is a very successful Native American reservation. It's only been really successful since 1989, when the federal government said that Native Americans would have casinos and that the rest of us don't, at least in our state. We don't let anybody else have them. And they've done wonderful things, and they have language tables, and they're doing wonderful things. But we also have a Carlton County Historical Society. When I first went there, and I said, well, where are the Native American? I'm interested in Native American history in our county. They said, oh, they have their own historical society. This is the historical society for our county. All the members of the reservation vote in our local elections. They're part of our county. So now I'm going to go back and do what Phoebe's doing in her area. I'm going to be asking and putting these questions to the historical. We are just having an incredible celebration of 100 years ago. There was a terrible fire, and thousands of people died, whole families died in these farming communities that just swept through the whole county. It was started by the timber companies leaving trash timber behind and the railroad sparks. And so far I've been reading all these articles in our newspaper about the 100th anniversary, and I haven't read one article that mentions one Native person. And I'm going to find out that history and try to reintroduce it, because actually the fire was in the fall, so there still are 6 or 8 months for us to talk about that. Okay, that's enough for me. This is my job, is to, run this panel. And somehow I didn't get the questions for this panel that were sent to me, but where's this first one? Right here. Oh, so each of these people is from a town that we visited this week. I was just so thrilled because I'm retired from my professorship, which I did early. I liberated myself because I started young and I worked really hard. I was able to stay for the whole week and go to every event in every town, and it's just been a wonderful experience for me. So, I'm going to ask each person to introduce him or herself and then explain what you've learned from the French Week activities in your town. Okay, George would like to be saved for last. Phoebe.
Yeah, he just whispered, save me for last. I thought I was second. Good afternoon. I'm Phoebe Hayes, and I'm a native and a resident of New Iberia, Louisiana. And I love my parish. Just don't believe everything you listen or you hear in the news about Iberia. Yes, we have our share of problems in terms of crime, etc., but it's not taking over the city. So sometimes you have to be a little bit discerning in terms of what you choose to believe. It is a beautiful place, and we have beautiful people that live there. And one of the things, I guess I was supposed to introduce myself first. That was good enough, huh? Okay. So I retired from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette after 26 years, and in 2013, I was a professor and a dean there, and loved my job, loved the people that I work with, love UL. Not a football person, but I love the academic life that I was blessed to participate in. I decided that I would do volunteer work, like a lot of people do after retirement, and I started volunteering in the genealogy room of the library near my home, and found some literature, some books, documents that were not exactly truthful. Oh, and also, by the way, I found some symbols around town that troubled me. The books excluded blacks. The books had to do with certain professionals, such as physicians. They had to do with veterans, okay, of different wars, such as World War I, World War II, the Korean conflict. And there were no blacks in any of those books from the 1930s, 1940s, etc. And the symbols around the city, murals, except on Hopkins Street, which is a predominantly or a historically black area, community. The murals that exist do not depict my people at all. So in other words, we don't exist. And as a good friend of mine who happens to be a freelance reporter wrote in her blog, she wrote on the invisible 40%. And she was talking about almost half of Iberia Parish, New Iberia's population is black, and we are not represented in its official telling of its history. We're not represented in its art. We are represented in the crime reports and the misrepresentations of us as depicted through caricatures, I think, of the 1940s, 1930s. And it's time to right that. The Jim Crow period, which was the period of segregation in the South and the North, which I've come to understand, was legalized and forced segregation, discrimination. And I've asked in certain different public gatherings, you know, who among us, and that didn't mean black, white, it doesn't matter, remember Jim Crow segregation. Now, as I tell people, I was a child of segregation, of Jim Crow segregation, because I grew up through it, and when it ended, I was 14 years old, well, going on 15. So I didn't experience it the way the adults in my family did. But I know, as one of my great-great-grandfathers said about slavery, I know it was hell. And the further back you went, the more hellish that experience was for those people. And it was such an insult to their dignity, as well as their safety and their mental health. So what I came to understand is that when I went through the library, I wasn't angry at any one person. I was angry, but not at any one individual. That these books were relics, as I call them, of an era that has gone by, but they still are in the library. They're still present in our public spaces that my taxes and everyone else's taxes pay for, and they're not being challenged. So one of my strong beliefs as an academic and as a researcher, and I'm not a historian, I'm a researcher, is that if you want something to be done, you do it yourself. And so I love research and I love writing. I don't have a chance to do it as much as I used to, but I love writing, love reading, so write my own story. And I learned a long time ago, if I wait for others to write it, you know, it'll never get done. So, and I formed an organization, I know you're a little long. I formed an organization in Iberia Parish so that it wouldn't just be about me, it would be about this organization trying to correct what was omitted. And it's the Iberia African American Historical Society. And it's a wonderful organization, 501c3 with 18 charter members who are multiracial and who are as excited, I think, as I am about the potential for this organization. And I think I'm going to pass the mic on, because you know I can talk.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I am Kathy Richard. I wear two hats. The first one is I'm the Healthcare Initiative Director for the Louisiana Cultural Economy Foundation. We have all cultural workers get access to healthcare and economic development. My second hat is I am one of the co-founders of the Richard Sale Barn, and Le Bayou Legendaire, which is our nonprofit associated with the Richard Sale Barn, which is a listening room in Abbeville. And I have to say at this point, you know when you're doing something and you just do it and you just keep going, and then later something comes back to you. It wasn't until Tuesday did I realize that the barn was a creative placemaking. I mean, it did not occur to me that that's what we were doing, but that is in fact what we did. But we wanted to preserve the heritage of the French rural culture, especially the cowboy area. My husband is a third-generation cowboy. It's his family's auction barn that we placed on the historical registry. So that's kind of our background. We have local music that performs in there. We don't have a dance floor, so we're a listening room. We're for people to come and listen to the music. So Abbeville was very excited to be part of Creative Placemaking Week in French Week. I think our speakers were Carol Bibel from the AOC Culture Center, and she spoke on how they were able to do restoration and renovation and re-energize their community through creative placemaking. And I will say that Abbeville, although I have been to many creative placemaking workshops across the state, Abbeville was very, very new to it. And so they didn't quite understand what we really were going to be talking about. Because of that, I think that we didn't have a lot of diversity in the room, which we are going to diligently work to make those changes. We had one wonderful gentleman, Elbert Dawson, who I hunted down and said, you have to come to this. He's a wonderful African-American who's in charge of the Herod Village with a nonprofit. And the speaker in the afternoon was Casey Phillips, who is in charge of the Walls Project. So for 12 years, they have been doing creative murals, giving the community and the neighborhoods the tools to create their own murals. So, and that was very important, as he said, not going into saying, you need this, but giving them the opportunity to find what they need and giving them an opportunity to make it happen for them. Elbert was there, he listened to Casey, and he was very excited. So we're gonna have some great conversations that are gonna come out of that. I think also the people from Abbeville realized that after the conversations were over at the Abbey Theater, which is where we were, we went to the barn that night, and there were a lot of conversations that came out to how can we make Abbeville more inclusively community friendly. And one of them was, let's have an evening where everybody sits on their porch and meets their neighbor in whatever community you're in, but meet your neighbor, and maybe that'll turn into a neighborhood watch. Once you meet your neighbors and you figure out, who they are and get to know them. So there's a lot of different things that have come out of that I'm very encouraged that we can take to next levels, because I saw several people today, what are we going to do next? So that's extremely encouraging for a community who knew nothing about creative placemaking to be excited about what can we do next and who can we invite, and this person needs to come and that person needs to come, and really start making it a lot bigger conversation.
Say something real quick?
Yeah.
So I can't remember who the guy from Belgium
Oh,
is.
Luke Hooley.
From Abbeville, he married someone from Abbeville.
Yes.
He cornered me on the sidewalk outside and said that he wanted to, if we had, in the future when we have creative placemaking workshops and there's a fee attached to it, that he wants to pay for all those residents so that way they can then participate.
That's wonderful.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yes.
Can I just say one thing too? I thought that the afternoon conversation, in most of these places, we had an open conversation in the afternoon about where the community go, what the community thought. I thought that the conversation in Abbeville turned into an amazing conversation towards the end. That basically Phoebe and others of us were asking, where are the African-American people, black people in your community? And then there was a really candid discussion about that, and a kind of, you know, openness, I felt, you know, to thinking about how to work with them in more ways. So I was really impressed.
Because Phoebe was right. We do have several Robert Dafford murals in Abbeville, and we're very proud of them. We have, I think, 4 or 5 of them. But she's right, it doesn't reflect our diversity. And we need to change that conversation, and we need to change making that happen. With the exception of one mural is about the Sicilian population of Abbeville. But
Communities do you have in Abbeville?
we have African American, we have Caucasian, we have Vietnamese, we have Hispanic, Sicilian, is that a big Sicilian? But the other conversation is also Vietnamese. When they came to Louisiana right after the Vietnam War, I mean, I know they had difficulty for people who had been in the war to look at them coming into their community. And I've had several conversations with several Vietnamese people about that. So that's also, and I learned in my own town that they have their own festival. And I had no idea they did. So how can, they have it at their own temple. How can we take it and bring it into the main square? How can we bring them so more people can embrace it, and find out about it, and learn, and gather them into the conversation as well?
Hi, I'm Tanya Doucette. I'm on Washington Town Council. We enjoy having y'all this week. It showed us that the French immersion is within our reach, and we appreciate that. We're also looking forward to our community garden to connect our youth with our senior population. And we're also interested in doing our historic town tours of our town. And also was maybe something at our library where the children can meet once a week and they would do storytelling and to look at the books that we have of our town so that they actually, you know, experience their culture. It would be great.
Thank you. Yes.
Because I think that one thing that we learned in Washington that I didn't know, you know, like the third oldest settlement in Louisiana, and that the people that settled there were from all over the world. And so, you know, so there's a really rich, you know, history there that can be, like Phoebe is doing in New Iberia Parish, I think could be uncovered also in Washington, or recovered.
That's one of the things that I'm hoping, and I've talked to friends in surrounding parishes, is that this could, because sometimes people will say, well, you know, we want some help to, for example, identify the doctors in our community, the early doctors, Black doctors. One of the things I'm beginning to learn is that I can't do everything. As much as my brain gets so excited and wanting to engage, so that means I want to encourage and inspire other people to do the same thing, or some aspect, some version of the same thing in their own communities, because our story is the same story other communities have. And it doesn't matter, even if you're just talking about African Americans, it's just that my special interest is in the African American community. I'm concerned about why women aren't represented in the women or the physicians who practice, the early physicians of Iberia. And I have been trying to find evidence of, you know, white females who were physicians in Iberia Parish in the time period I'm looking at, from Reconstruction to the end of Jim Crow. The earliest, and I've gone to the Medical Society, I've talked to some 80 and 90-year-old physicians, and again, I grew up there. I never remember a woman, a white female physician practicing medicine in Iberia Parish. And when I asked one of the 90-year-old, do y'all know Dr. Pavi from New Iberia? Dr. Pavi said, Sugar, I think that the first female we had was Brunette King Blue. And I said, well, Dr. Pavi, Dr. King Blue was Black. I'm trying to find who was in the 1970s, because I was a student at Xavier. I'm talking about from Reconstruction to the end of Jim Crow. And she came after that, after 1970. So, can't find any. But I was able to find 4 Black females. And the researcher in me wants to ask why. Why was that possible? I know what happened with the Black females I studied. Their fathers had a big influence. And I need to study more, and I also need to know, just because I recognize, just because I can't find white female physicians, doesn't mean that they didn't exist. I just have to look further. What I was going to say, so I think my responsibility too is just to encourage others in their different communities to do the same thing, to replicate.
What's the next question? Would you read the next one?
So, well, I didn't answer my question. So, okay, so I'm going to repeat the question. What have you learned from the French Week activities in your hometown? So I took a few notes, and what I've learned is that we have a long way to go in regards to creating a, comment tu dis, espace francophonie? A space for French. One of the reasons that we took Semaine de la Francophonie on the road was not only to share it with other communities, but in a small way to kind of expose the areas that we need to focus on. And so there's that. We need to do a better job of identifying our French cultural assets, and we need to do it collectively. We need to, we need to do a better job of connecting with our organizations, even if they're in Lafayette, that doesn't matter. Rain doesn't know where it falls. People don't know when they're crossing town lines or parish lines. I stole that quote from Parish President Bill Fondo. If there is going to be a true Renaissance, French Renaissance, it cannot happen just in one community. It has to happen in the whole of Acadiana and the whole of Louisiana. So that was my takeaway from Semaine de la Francophonie. What we're going to focus on, specifically on a project, is the residency program that builds upon a project with Eno de Memoire. And it will be coming back to Louisiana in 2019. We'll be working with the Acadiana Center for the Arts and likely the Baton Rouge Arts Council, and hopefully one more Arts Council, as well as additional partners in the state. And because of Phoebe, again, I have even more desire to really, I keep saying uncover, but it should really be recover, like the history, reclaim the history of all people in my area. So.
Great. Okay, you have the questions, which I never received the questions I was supposed to pose. So I have Caroline George.
So here's one.
Okay, which one here? Oh, what would you plan to implement in your community? Some of you sort of addressed that. Does anybody want to add?
I want to say I'm also proud that I'm with an organization called the Confrérie d'Abbeville, which is, we put on the 5,000 egg omelet, but we also pledge ourselves to preserve the French culture and to transmit it to our children. So we have finally, you know all the craziness that has happened in Abbeville with the school board, but from that horrible stuff came a great thing where several school board members are gone who have resisted French immersion in our schools in Vermilion Parish. So we went to them last week, and we have passed the first hurdle. The Confrérie took it upon ourselves to try to make that happen, and we have passed the first hurdle. They have said yes, they want French immersion, so we are moving forward towards that, because Vermilion Parish, our motto is the most Cajun place on earth. And where the most French is spoken, but yet we don't have French immersion. So we're excited that we've turned that corner, yay! and the French are always, because here's the thing that, I'm probably talking too much, but one of the things I always had about teachers coming from another country, and I understood why, because our language wasn't written down and things like that, but my friends from France would come, and I would gather older people to come and speak to them, and sometimes, and this is funny, I know if you're from France, Je n'ai pas faim, okay, I'm not hungry. But in Cajun French, we would say je plains, I'm full. But in France, it means you're pregnant, you know? And so my friends would correct the elderly people. No, je n'ai pas faim. And I would finally, it made the elderly people feel that their French was not good enough. And finally, a person said to me, tout le français est bon français. All French is good French. And so I finally made my friends, when I'm in France, I'm going to say je n'ai pas faim. But when you're here in Cajun country, we say je plains. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know. So the feeling of trying, while we have French immersion, getting the elderly people to still embrace their language, be it Creole French or whatever French, but embracing the two cultures together and making tout le français et bon français.
Being able to go between one type of French to the other type of French makes you an even richer French speaker, because you're code switching and you're able to identify with the groups that you're talking to. That's wonderful. I think that if I understand the question correctly, to me, my opinion is, you have to read it to me because I can't see that. but my opinion is that in Iberia Parish, we were able to affect change, not just in terms of inspiring people or encouraging people to look at our research, but also history is social. It's all about society change, social change. So as I tell people, for me, I love history. I never really studied history in college other than the requirements. But for me, it's evidence that I needed to get Iberia Parish to be better than what it is and what it has been. So don't tell me that you can't put the names of blacks on some of these streets and some of these bridges because we're only putting people who have achieved certain things. Well, have you heard of this black woman who was the first one to become a physician in the state of Louisiana? You know, those kinds of things. And so if you're going to argue with me, good, but I'm going to argue back. Because I'm a debater. I mean, I told my but the idea is you don't take no as an answer. So I'm blessed that I'm living in this time because I don't have to do those fights. And it's almost like people see me coming, it's like, oh, trust me, it's easier to just let her go. But one of the things, and I can be honest because I've been honest with my friends in Iberia, we have a plantation in Iberia called the Shadows Along the Tash. That plantation has always been in my side, my peripheral vision. And I say that because that was not a place I wanted to go to, even as a child. And my parents certainly wouldn't have taken us there, even if we were allowed to go there, which we would not have been allowed to during the segregation period. But there were 2 theaters that, in my recollection, there were more, but we were not allowed to sit downstairs. I do remember the few times my parents allowed us to go, because they protected us. They didn't want us to be exposed to that segregation humbug. So we rarely went to the theater, but when they did take us, we always had to sit upstairs. There was no such thing as sitting downstairs. And it's interesting because my friends in New Iberia, a few of them in my earlier conversations, they didn't have any recollection of that because it affected them differently. To them, things were in order. They were the way they were supposed to be. So what I've done is, as I've told my friends at the university about certain things that needed to change. You can't expect me to sit at the table as a black woman, having grown up during Reconstruction, during the Jim Crow era, and keep my mouth shut. So as I told one of them, I don't go to plantations like the Shadows. I went to the Whitney around New Orleans because it was about commemorating the lives of the people who were enslaved on Louisiana plantations and telling the truth about slavery and its brutal aspects. But I wasn't going to go to a plantation to learn about the South's, dainty customs. I can read that in a book. And I wasn't going to be served mint tea on the lawn, etc. And my friend who's over that particular plantation, she understood. So it's like I was so happy, so I was able to then be even more honest. So my point is that what I have been allowed to do is to work with people like in the Shadows. Vermilionville, here in Lafayette. Have any of you taken the tour there when they're bored? And one of my concerns there was that we're still not telling the true story. Y'all are presenting this area as though everybody were free people of color. and then they were much lighter than I am. That's not true. The majority of blacks in this area were enslaved, and they suffered. So you're going to celebrate us and include us as you're doing. We've got to be truthful. And again, I'm so happy because they're making a large effort now to tell that true story. So now we're changing the narrative of the shadows, not even changing it. We're including the blacks who worked at the shadows and who, because they know all the names, we know the names. We have pictures of those individuals who were enslaved at the shadows. The downtown area of Iberia Parish, as I told them, most of us, because I grew up downtown, were probably descendants of those former slaves of the shadows. And if you want blacks to come to the shadows has to now be seen as being relevant to our community. Make it a center, a resource center for people like me who want to learn more about my ancestors. There are a lot of people who want to do genealogical research. So what has happened, we're planning we're not planning it yet, but there's a commitment now to have a Black Genealogy Conference at the center, the Visitor Center. Our organization, IAHS, the Historical Society, we meet at the shadows. And everyone knows about it. And we're going to bring more events there. Same thing with the Bayou Teche Museum. Very few exhibits of blacks in Iberia. And that is now changing. We actually have the exhibits director on our board. And he's seeing now, you don't have to always beat people over the head, but he sees and he agrees that we need to be more inclusive in the telling of the history. So I'm excited.
Implementation of things you'd like to see.
Well, we're planning our community garden, and we're doing the tours twice a year now, but we're gonna try and get the number up. What we're doing at the library, which this is just all in planning stages, but we're getting our people together, and we're getting the business leaders and everyone in our community, the heads of the churches, and the schools. We'll see where we can go from there.
So I kind of answered it earlier with the end of the memoir, but I want to just kind of answer it with what we're going to do as a result of Semaine de la Francophonie. And the idea is to create a toolbox that would, and which was actually partly inspired by Monique Tessier from Quebec, who has been working with Mavis Brugier to create almost like activities connected to each one of her French tables, in French, in English, and Cajun French, or Louisiana French. And the idea is that that toolbox can then, or that activity can then, or those activities can then be shared with other communities like New Iberia and Abbeville and Washington. So that way, if anyone's interested in starting up a French table and having resources that they can pull from, that would be in there. And I talked to your friend Jade at Shadows on the Teche, and who's also on the board, and who will also do the same thing, basically identifying words in Louisiana French, and International French and English connected to Shadows on the Teche that will then live inside of this toolbox that then can be shared between communities. We anticipate doing that with all of our communities that we're working with. Again, it's to develop that toolbox that we can then share between us all. And Marcusson has graciously said that she would provide articles, and I'm going to hit up Anne Gadbois also. And hopefully we can get those items translated into French, so that way those can then be shared between communities as well. And I'll put, Matt and Nick probably would be willing to help with that, with Codeville.
So I want to thank George Marks, Phoebe Hayes, Kathy Richard, and Tanya Doucette. Thank you very much for coming here.